buddy Aaron here. We're back from Hawaii. We just went on a research trip to look at instruments from the 1880s so that I could build an instrument in that style with hand tools, and I'm documenting the process for Mortise and Tenon magazine. So while we were there, I got to see several instruments from the 1880s made by our three makers, Diaz, Nunes, and Santo. I saw some in a museum and some in a collector's collection. And so I really needed to see them up close to decide what I was going to do when I did my project. I really wanted to see the materials, the tools they're using, the techniques they're using. I wanted to learn more about the shops in Hawaii at that time so that I could build my instrument in the same style. So these three guys, they came to Hawaii as agricultural labor, even though they were trained as woodworkers. Then after their contracts were done with ag labor, they got jobs in other people's cabinet shops and furniture making shops until they could go out on their own. So we know they worked on furniture and cabinets as well. I think the instruments, the ukuleles they made, were made kind of nights and weekends for their first few years in other people's shops, and therefore I think they were using shop scraps. And as I look at the instruments and you see what woods they chose for what, they really sometimes just used whatever was available. So as I selected my woods for the same project, I kind of had a mind to the same thing, especially because I'm going to just be using my hand tools, and I want to work kind of in the fashion they worked. When I selected things, I kind of selected woods that were already on their way to being something, and it's going to save me a lot of time. And it's also, I think, the spirit in which they worked. So to begin with, the back and sides are koa on all these instruments. I have two pieces of koa that I selected. I got these from my friend who runs a mill. They were intended to be big book match pieces for guitars, but the second slice is thinner than a guitar maker would want. So it's one thick slice, one thin slice. And he was like, oh, I'll just give you this slice for free. I don't think anybody can use it. Maybe you can make some binding from it, he said. But when I look at it, it's actually the thickness that the old makers used. It's about 70 thousandths, which the originals are all 60 to 70 thousandths. So, and sometimes they would just sand the outside, but the inside is still rough. So I might just leave this with the sawmill marks inside the instrument and then just prep the outside surface. And I can get a back and the sides really easily out of this. I can get a couple instruments. So I think I'm gonna do that. I think it would be fun. They were working with veneers like this to book match and do marquetry on big tables. And so I could see them grabbing an orphan slice like this out of the scrap bin for their instruments. I'm also gonna have koa for the fretboard and head plate. This is a piece that's also a scrap from another shop. And I think this will be funny for fretboard and head plate. And then I've got a piece of koa for the neck. It's about 1 inch thick, which is what those guys tended to do. They would take a chunk and cut it off and laminate it to make a heel. And then over here, they'd cut a joint and then laminate it to make the headstock. So this is plenty for that. It's a good hard piece of koa, and it's well quarter sawn. And the goal would be that I would also get my tuning pegs and my bridge pins and my bridge out of this piece of koa. We'll see. And then of course I've got my Douglas fir top. All the instruments I saw, except for one or two, which are a little later, have a softwood top, and it's often fir. I know that you don't usually think of fir as an instrument grade wood, but they were using them and I use it all the time. So this is old growth, straight grain fir, very well quarter sawn. It's a scrap from another project. I don't even know what it comes from, but it's about the right size and thickness to be a top. So I'm gonna go for that. Yeah, and then I need to do binding and decoration. All the old instruments I looked at have either no decoration or they have rope binding, and rope is made up from chunks of wood laid out like this. My theory is that most of the binding matches all the instruments, like about 80% of it is matching. I think they were getting it from furniture supply catalogs. This is available to furniture makers as stringing or inlay for boxes or things like that, and instrument makers just ended up liking it, especially on the islands. This is the stuff I get from a supplier, and it's got a black veneer on it. One side gets sanded away, the other side just stays in the instrument. I didn't see any black veneers on any of theirs, so I'm not using this. I'm gonna use my homemade rope binding that's got a maple veneer, because they always had light colored veneers on all those. The one avant-garde thing I did is that this isn't laid out regularly. It's kind of a random pattern of different species. So kind of breaking the rules with that, but I like the spirit of it. So it's gonna have rope binding as a rosette around the top as an end graft. And then it has kind of two pieces of rope binding as a herringbone inlay down the middle of the fretboard and down the middle of the head plate. That's probably all I'll do for decoration on this instrument using my homemade rope. So yeah, it's really not that much wood. It's really just a pile of scraps. Douglas for a top, koa for everything else, and then my rope binding. Yes, I've seen some of their instruments seem to have irregular or shop-made rope binding, but it seems to be mostly from a supplier. I'm still hunting that mystery down of where they were getting stuff. But in 1880s in Honolulu in a wood shop, they were already ordering hide glue, nails, hinges, plane irons for their blades, you know, screws, all the things you'd have to order from a building supply catalog. They had to order it into the islands, so it doesn't seem unlikely that they could order inlay strips from a catalog too. So that's going to be future research. For now, I'm just getting started with my instrument. So yeah, stay tuned as we go through this process. It's going to be really fun, and it's going to be a cool little instrument. Cheers.